I warned my daughter, don't comment on our relationship at the family dinner. It's in your best interest. But when she was giving her speech, she said, Dad said I shouldn't comment on what is happening between us, but I hope you all know he is a selfish man. She wasn't ready for what happened next. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy these kinds of stories, support us by subscribing to this channel. Click on the like button and tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let me tell you how everything unfolded. I never imagined I'd have to draw a line in the sand with my own daughter, but life has a cruel way of circling back and forcing you to confront the messes you thought you'd sidestepped. My name's Malcolm Ross, 62 years old, founder and former CEO of Ross and Avery Holdings, a real estate and logistics firm that turned from a two-man operation in my garage to a multimillion-dollar family empire. I'd built everything with a handshake and grit, starting with a rusted-out pickup and working sunup to sundown, until sweat and sacrifice became second nature. I wasn't born into money. I carved it out of stone with my bare hands. And maybe that's the root of all this tension, because my daughter, Danielle, didn't have to carve out a damn thing. Danielle used to be the kind of daughter fathers bragged about. Sharp, polished, first to volunteer at charity drives, first to speak at company events, always with the right words, the right smile. I watched her grow up in boardrooms instead of playgrounds, tutored by financial advisors and mentored by my closest partners. She graduated top of her class at Wharton. At 29, I handed her the keys to the company, believing she was ready to lead us into the next chapter. I thought I was passing the baton. Turns out, I was tossing a loaded weapon into the hands of someone who thought being born into money meant she was owed more of it. The first real sign of rot came on her 32nd birthday, just a month before the family dinner that would blow the lid off everything. We were sitting in my study, me sipping bourbon, her scrolling on her phone like the world outside that screen didn't exist, when she dropped it casually, as if asking for a favor instead of demanding something outrageous. Dad, for my birthday, I want you to pay off my house. I looked at her, thinking I'd misheard. She didn't even blink. It's not that much, she added. Just over $100,000 left on the mortgage. She said it like she was asking me to cover her brunch tab. That was the first time I saw the entitled glint in her eyes. Not ambition, not drive, just expectation. Like my hard-earned money was hers to redirect on a whim. I set my glass down and said, absolutely not. She laughed like I was joking, then realized I wasn't, and the temperature in the room dropped. The argument wasn't loud. Danielle never yelled. She weaponized her silence. Passive-aggressive stares, carefully curated sighs, little remarks meant to shame you into submission. She said things like, I've done everything you asked. I've carried this company, and this is the thanks I get. I told her carrying the company meant doing your job, not cashing out favors like a spoiled teenager. The conversation ended with her storming out, and I didn't chase after her. I let her leave because I needed her to stew in it, to feel what it's like when the answer is no. I hoped it'd be a wake-up call. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I found out she was planning to speak at the family dinner, our annual gathering where key stakeholders and extended relatives all came together under one roof to break bread, review the business, and pretend we were more united than we really were. I didn't want drama. I knew Danielle was still simmering, still resentful. So I pulled her aside, the night before the dinner, and looked her dead in the eye. Don't comment on our relationship at the family dinner. It's in your best interest. I said it slowly, clearly, not as a threat but a boundary. I needed her to hear me, to understand that there would be consequences if she crossed the line. She gave me this tight smile, the kind you give someone just before you stab them in the back. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of fear but disappointment. I could feel something shifting. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power. Danielle had come to believe that being CEO made her immune to discipline, above reproach. And maybe that was my fault too. I put her on that pedestal. I defended her against whispers when she made risky calls. I'd kept the board in check when they questioned her priorities. I'd been her shield, and she mistook it for blind loyalty. That's when I knew, if she defied me publicly, if she used that stage to take shots at me in front of everyone, I wouldn't protect her again. I wouldn't lift a damn finger. I called my lawyer the next morning just to ask questions, not to pull strings. Hypothetically, I said, If the family board were to lose confidence in the CEO, what would the process look like? He answered calmly, detailing the clause buried in our company's charter about conduct, reputation, and the CEO's duty to maintain family unity. It wasn't about control, it was about values. And if Danielle decided to sacrifice that unity for the sake of a petty vendetta, she'd be the one lighting the match. All I had to do was watch it burn. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration of our legacy, our future, our blood. But in my gut, I knew Danielle wasn't coming to honor anything. She was coming to make a point, and I was already preparing to let her face the consequences. Because this time I wouldn't intervene. I'd let the family see who she'd become. I'd let her ruin the illusion herself. And part of me, the stubborn, wounded part, hoped she would, just so I could stop pretending she was still the daughter I once knew. The air that night had the weight of old secrets and the polish of forced smiles. We hosted the family dinner at the Ashwood Estate, our ancestral home in upstate New York, where every marble pillar and oil painting reeked of legacy. It was Danielle's idea to bring everyone there this year, cousins, spouses, board members, even distant relatives who usually declined. On the surface, it looked like unity. In truth, I suspected it was a stage, and she was ready for her spotlight. Everyone arrived dressed to impress. Men in tailored suits, women in gowns that whispered wealth with every swish. Crystal clinked, laughter rose like champagne bubbles, and yet, I felt a pressure in my chest I couldn't shake. I kept scanning the room, not for danger, but for betrayal. My own daughter, somewhere among the glittering guests, was rehearsing the knife she'd twist. Danielle was radiant, as always. She wore a sleek black gown and a diamond necklace that once belonged to her grandmother. Her hair was pulled back in a bun, not a strand out of place. She smiled with calculated warmth, hugging relatives she usually avoided, complimenting the wine she'd once called pedestrian. Watching her work, the room was like witnessing a well-trained actress nail her final performance. But I saw through it. Her eyes never softened. Even when she greeted me with a brief, cool kiss on the cheek, her expression told me, "You can't stop me." And I didn't try to. I just gave a nod and turned away, because I had already decided I wouldn't shield her this time. Dinner was served beneath the chandelier in the grand dining hall, the table stretching the length of the room like a runway for family pride. Roasted duck, truffle risotto, imported wines, the usual display of opulence meant to distract from the growing cracks in our unity. My brother Graham offered the opening toast, and others followed suit, toasting to the company's resilience, to new ventures, to family. I kept my words brief when it was my turn. To family, I said simply, raising my glass. My eyes flicked toward Danielle. Her smile curved upward, but it was hollow. She was waiting, and then, after the final course had been cleared, she rose from her seat like a judge taking the bench. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight," she began, her voice steady, commanding. The room hushed instantly. "But something's been on my heart. Something I think this family deserves to hear." My jaw clenched. I didn't look at her. I focused on my wine glass, the smooth reflection of the chandelier rippling in the red liquid. Then she said it, the line I'll never forget. "Dad told me I shouldn't comment on what's happening between us, but I hope you all know, he is a selfish man." The silence that followed was seismic, cracked through the air like glass shattering in slow motion. Some guests looked confused. Others turned their heads toward me in disbelief. Graham dropped his fork. My cousin's wife gasped so sharply you could hear it echo. And Danielle just stood there, poised, as if she'd delivered a truth the rest of us had been too cowardly to name. She continued, framing her grievance with elegant rage. How she'd worked tirelessly, sacrificed her youth, carried the company through expansion, and how her efforts had been rewarded with disrespect and stonewalling. Her words were calculated, almost poetic. But I knew what this really was. It wasn't a speech. It was a public shaming. A daughter putting her father on trial in front of his peers. I didn't speak. I didn't storm out. I didn't interrupt. I sat there and let her finish. And when she did, when the room sat in stunned silence, waiting for my rebuttal, I simply stood, adjusted my cufflinks, and excused myself to the library. Not because I was angry, not because I was hurt, But because the verdict had already been decided, not by her, but by everyone watching. The people in that room didn't need me to defend myself. They'd seen enough. And when the door to the dining room closed behind me, I felt no urge to return. I sat in the library, the one room in that mansion that still felt like mine. Surrounded by leather-bound books and the faint scent of pipe tobacco, I poured myself a drink and waited. Sure enough, within 15 minutes, they started trickling in, one by one. Graham came first, shaking his head. "What the hell was that about?" he muttered. I didn't answer. Then came Eleanor, the family CFO. "Malcolm," she said quietly, "I think it's time we discuss succession again." I knew what she meant. Danielle had taken a public torch to the very bridge she was meant to protect. And now the board was ready to cross a new one without her. Later that night, as I was preparing to leave, I passed Danielle in the front hall. Her shoulders were squared, chin high, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Maybe she expected applause. Maybe she thought this would trigger some emotional confession from me. Instead, I walked past her, pausing only to say, "You should have listened." She didn't respond, but her silence wasn't victory. It was fear dressed as defiance. Because now everything was in motion, and there would be no stopping the fallout. 3 days after the dinner, I was having my morning coffee on the veranda, watching the frost melt off the hedges when my phone buzzed on the table. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was familiar, our lawyer's office. I let it go to voicemail. I already knew what the call was about. It wasn't my decision, not directly, but I'd been in this game long enough to recognize the gears turning before the machine roared to life. The moment Danielle chose to weaponize her position to air private grievances, she broke an unspoken covenant, one every family business is built on. Don't make the internal rot public, or the whole foundation risks collapse. And the board, composed of cousins, aunts, and even a few third-generation silent partners, didn't take kindly to being made props in a family feud. By mid-morning, the news had broken internally. Danielle received an email from the family's general counsel, simple, sterile, final. Effective immediately, you are no longer qualified to serve as CEO of Ross and Avery Holdings, per Clause 14B of the company charter. A formal transition will be executed within 30 days. The message was signed by every board member. Not a single dissent. She must have sat staring at that screen in disbelief, waiting for a follow-up, a just kidding. Or at the very least, a personal call to soften the blow. But this wasn't a personal matter anymore. It was business. And Danielle, for all her brilliance, had failed to understand that distinction when she stepped up to that microphone and called her father a selfish man. I was in the study when she called. I didn't answer at first. I watched the phone light up on my desk, vibrating once, twice, then stopping, then again, then a third time. On the fourth attempt, I picked up, not out of sympathy but curiosity. Her voice was sharp, breathless, already tinged with panic. "Did you do this?" she snapped. "Tell me right now. Did you go behind my back and get me removed?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "No," I said. "But I warned you. I told you not to bring it up at the dinner. I told you it would be in your best interest." Her breath caught. For a moment, she didn't speak. I could almost hear her face fall, the silence thick with realization. "So you didn't tell them to do this?" she asked, her voice softer now. "No," I replied. "But you gave them a reason to, and they took it." That was when the shift happened. I could hear it in her tone. The rage dissolved into desperation. "Dad, please," she whispered. "You can fix this. You know you can. Just call them. Tell them you don't want this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "You humiliated me in front of the entire family. You painted me as the villain because I refused to fund your lifestyle. And now you want me to save you." I could hear her crying now. Quiet, restrained sobs. "Please," she said again. I wasn't thinking straight. I was angry. I didn't know they'd do this. For a flicker of a second, I felt it, that old instinct to protect, to fix, to step in and sweep the glass before she stepped on it. But that's exactly what had created this mess in the first place. Years of covering for her, smoothing her path, rewarding her tantrums with leniency instead of accountability. She had grown into someone who thought love looked like a blank check. And now, for the first time in her life, she was facing consequences no money could undo. "It's done," I told her. "And it's not my place to undo it. You wanted independence. Now you've got it." She hung up on me, not with the anger of a child denied candy, but with the hollow dread of someone who'd realized they'd gambled and lost everything. I sat there in the quiet, letting the moment sink in. I wasn't proud of what had happened, but I wasn't sorry either. This was the moment Danielle needed, whether she liked it or not. She had to rebuild, not with shortcuts or inherited titles, but from the same ground I once stood on. Only then would she understand the value of what I'd built, and what she so carelessly torched in the name of pride. Later that evening, I got a call from Graham. "She's been calling everyone," he said, voice low, crying, apologizing, asking for second chances. I asked him what he said. I told her it's not about second chances. It's about first impressions. And she just gave everyone a real strong one. I appreciated his honesty. The rest of the board echoed the same sentiment over the next few days. No one was eager to reinstate her. No one wanted a leader who could throw their own father under the bus to score a petty point. The damage wasn't just emotional, it was reputational. Clients had started asking questions. Partners were wary. The PR department had already drafted a statement for her transition. Danielle didn't call again, but I received a message from her mother, my ex-wife Patricia, asking to meet. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed space to let the dust settle. I needed Danielle to sit in the silence and listen to the echo of her own decisions. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Danielle went quiet after the fallout. The daughter who once filled every room with her voice, who never missed a meeting or an opportunity to make herself the center of any conversation, vanished into the background like a fading shadow. There were no press conferences, no strategic Instagram posts to shape the narrative. Just silence. That told me everything. She hadn't expected it to go this far. She'd miscalculated, believed her status as CEO and my daughter made her immune to real consequence. But the board didn't operate on sentiment. They moved with precision. They saw Danielle's public outburst not just as a personal insult to me, but a liability to the company's image, to its values, to its ability to maintain investor trust. And in our world, once trust cracks, the whole damn building starts to wobble. I heard from mutual contacts that she tried salvaging her footing in the days after her dismissal. She'd contacted 2 regional directors and attempted to call an emergency strategy meeting, trying to look proactive and involved. But by then, the email had made its rounds, and nobody wanted to be caught aligning with a sinking ship. The directors declined, politely but firmly. One of them told me later. She sounded broken, like she was trying to sound in control but didn't know what to control anymore. That stuck with me, because Danielle had always prided herself on being the one with answers, the one with a plan. But now, stripped of the title, the office, the illusion of invincibility, she was just another person trying to claw her way out of the mess she made. A week later, she reached out again, not to me but to her cousins, aunts, even former interns she once barely acknowledged. She asked for advice. She hinted at needing work. I wasn't supposed to hear any of this, but word travels fast in a family like ours. The kind of fast that leaves no room for privacy, only reputation. And Danielle's had taken a blow, not just because of what she did to me, but because of how she carried herself afterward. There was no humility, no accountability. Only this quiet, desperate attempt to reassemble her image with borrowed parts. But the truth was, no one knew what she stood for anymore. Without the Ross name and her position, who was she? She had built a castle on inheritance and forgotten to lay the foundation herself. Then came the job offer from a mid-tier consulting firm in the city. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't powerful. But it was real. A 9-to-5 middle management position that paid a fraction of what she once earned. I heard she took it, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Her lifestyle didn't match her bank account anymore. The mortgage she'd asked me to pay off still loomed, along with property taxes, maintenance fees, and the kind of bills you don't think about when you've spent your life believing your father will always write the check. And I didn't step in. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not with vengeance, but with detachment. Because if I stepped in again, I just reset the cycle. And this time, I needed her to feel every inch of the climb. One afternoon, I got a call from Patricia. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year. Our divorce had been clean, if not cordial. She didn't meddle in my life, and I didn't ask questions about hers. But this wasn't about us. "Malcolm," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I think you should come see her." I asked why. She said Danielle had moved in with her temporarily, that she wasn't handling things well. "She's not eating, barely sleeping. She thinks everyone hates her." I kept silent, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say. Patricia went on. "She's lost. You don't have to forgive her, but you should talk to her. She needs to know she hasn't lost you too." That hit me in a place I didn't like to acknowledge. Because as angry as I was, as hurt as I'd been, I hadn't stopped being her father. Still, I didn't agree to see her, not yet. I needed time. Not to cool off, but to gather my thoughts, to figure out what kind of father I wanted to be from here forward. The kind who rescued his daughter every time she stumbled? Or the kind who let her learn what it meant to stand up on her own? I knew what the old me would have done. The Malcolm who built an empire brick by brick, who gave his kids more than he ever had. He'd have written a check, made a call, pulled a string. But that Malcolm had been used, insulted, and dismissed in front of 40 people by the very person he protected. And that changes a man. Danielle sent me a message the following Sunday. Not a call, just a text. "I know I went too far. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. There were no excuses, no caveats, just words, plain, stripped, human. But forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's a process, and I wasn't ready to walk that bridge yet. She'd have to keep walking alone for a while longer. Not as punishment, but as part of the path. Because sometimes love isn't about saving someone from the fire. Sometimes it's about letting them walk through it and trusting they'll come out stronger on the other side. It was raining the morning Patricia showed up unannounced at my door. Not a storm, just that persistent kind of rain that made the whole world look gray and tired. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, and yet when I opened the door, she looked almost exactly the same. Always polished, even when she was unraveling inside. She wore a beige trench coat, rain speckled across the shoulders, her hair pulled into the same low bun she wore the day we signed the divorce papers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You have 5 minutes to yell at me, or I'm going to start crying right here on your porch." I stepped aside and let her in without a word. She moved through the house slowly, as if the walls were haunted. I suppose in a way they were. This house had seen the best and worst of us. Birthday parties, anniversaries, screaming matches at 2 a.m. This place held echoes we didn't talk about anymore. I led her to the sunroom, made her tea the way she liked it. Black with 1 sugar, a slice of lemon on the side. Some rituals survive divorce. We sat facing the garden. The glass panes fogged up slightly from the heat inside versus the cold drizzle outside. She took a sip and then got to the point. "I came because Danielle isn't well," she said, not looking at me. "She's not sleeping. She's barely eating. She lost her job last week." That caught me off guard. "The consulting firm?" I asked. She nodded. "They let her go. Said she missed too many days, didn't meet performance standards. She says she couldn't focus." I believe her. Her voice cracked, just for a second. Then she composed herself. "She's not angry anymore, Malcolm. She's just broken." I sat with that word. Broken. It's not something you want to hear about your child, even when part of you thinks they brought it on themselves. I stared out at the rain-slicked patio stones, trying to picture Danielle not as the CEO who took me down in front of our family, but as the little girl who used to fall asleep in the back seat during road trips, her head on Patricia's shoulder, legs curled beneath her like a cat. "She made her choice," I said quietly. "She didn't just hurt me. She embarrassed the entire family, the company. She treated her position like it was a crown, not a responsibility." Patricia didn't argue. That surprised me. She usually pushed back. Instead, she just nodded and said, "You're right. But Malcolm, don't you think it's possible that she did it because she thought you'd always be there to fix it?" I looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes weren't accusing. They were tired, sad. "We both created this, you know," she continued. "You gave her everything she asked for, and I never told her no either. We raised her thinking she was invincible. And now that she's not, she doesn't know how to be human." There was something brutally honest in that, something I hadn't allowed myself to face. I had given Danielle everything. A position she didn't earn, money she didn't need, loyalty she didn't appreciate. I thought I was showing love. Maybe I was just feeding a version of her that grew more entitled with every yes. And now the real world was swallowing her whole. "So what do you want me to do?" I asked. "Forgive her? Give her a second chance?" Patricia shook her head. "No, I just want you to talk to her. Let her say what she needs to say. Not as her boss. Not as the man she humiliated. Just as her father." It was such a simple request, and yet it landed like a stone in my chest. Because I didn't know if I had it in me to be just her father anymore. That role had been bruised, battered, twisted into something unfamiliar. Still, I told Patricia I'd think about it. She nodded, stood to leave, and paused at the door. "She cries when she thinks I'm asleep," she said. I've never heard her cry like that before, not even when we got divorced. She left without waiting for a response. I stood there in the foyer long after the door clicked shut, the rain still tapping against the windows like a quiet reminder of everything that was unresolved. That night, I walked into the guest room, Danielle's old room, still mostly untouched, and sat on the edge of the bed. The pink wallpaper had long been replaced with neutrals, but her bookshelf remained. Tattered Nancy Drew novels, old high school yearbooks, a photo of us at her college graduation, me with my arm around her shoulder, both of us grinning like we had the world in our hands. I remembered how proud I'd been that day. Not because she was smart, she'd always been smart, but because she had drive, purpose, a future she wanted to shape. Somewhere along the way, that future turned into entitlement. And now here we were, both sitting in the ruins of it. I didn't text her that night. I didn't call. But I did pull out the letter she'd written a week earlier, the one where she said she knew she went too far. I read it again. No excuses. No manipulation. Just pain. Honest, raw pain. And as much as I wanted to hold onto my anger, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a softening. A recognition that even when they fall from grace, our children are still ours. Not because they deserve it, but because we remember who they were before the world and we let them down. 3 weeks had passed since Patricia stood on my doorstep, and in that time, I hadn't made a move. Not because I was punishing Danielle, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't acting out of guilt. I've lived long enough to know the difference between guilt and grace. One is a knee-jerk reaction to discomfort, the other is a deliberate choice born of clarity. And I wasn't ready to act until I was clear. In those quiet weeks, I focused on what I could control, rebuilding the company's trust, smoothing the PR chaos Danielle's dinner speech had triggered, and mentoring the new interim CEO, a cousin named Leo who actually listened when people spoke. The company would be fine, but the family? That was more complicated. Legacy businesses carry more than assets. They carry memories, grudges, and ghosts. And Danielle had become all three. One Tuesday afternoon, I received a small envelope in the mail. Not a typed letter, not a legal document, just an envelope addressed in Danielle's handwriting. No return address, no text alert or warning. Inside was a single sheet of paper, torn from what looked like a plain journal. The ink had bled slightly, like maybe she'd written it in haste, or through tears. The note read, "I know I broke something between us. I don't expect you to repair it. But I want you to know I've started over. I took a job at a nonprofit. Entry level. I commute by train. It's humbling, but it's mine. For the first time, it's mine. I thought you'd want to know." There were no accusations, no pleas, no veiled manipulations. Just a quiet account of a new beginning. And something about that hit harder than all the screaming and crying ever had. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't reaching for the ladder. She was building her own. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the Danielle I once knew, the young woman who used to argue not for handouts, but for principles. The one who stayed up late reviewing contracts because she wanted to prove herself, not because she felt entitled to the corner office. That version had been lost somewhere along the way, buried under years of indulgence and unchecked privilege. But maybe, just maybe, she was clawing her way back. I didn't write back, but I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. Not as a memento, as a marker, a signpost that said, she's not where she should be, but she's not where she was either. That's progress. That's enough for now. I told no one about the letter. Not Patricia. Not Graham. Not the board. Because this wasn't about the company anymore. This was about us. A father and daughter trying to find a new language after years of speaking past each other. And some things are too sacred to be passed around like gossip. A few days later, I ran into her at the grocery store of all places, just down the aisle from the olive oils. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a navy sweater. No designer bag. No heels. Just Danielle, looking more like herself than she had in years. We locked eyes. There was a brief hesitation on both sides. Then she walked over, cautiously, like approaching a skittish animal. "Hi," she said. That was it. Just hi. I nodded. "Hey." I looked down at her basket. Almond milk, pasta, canned beans. I almost smiled. Not because of what she was buying, but because she was buying it. Not sending someone. Not ordering in bulk. Just living. We didn't talk long. Just exchanged a few polite words, standing beside the imported balsamic vinegars like two strangers who used to know each other intimately. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't awkward. It was careful. Careful is a start. Before she left, she looked at me and said, "I'm trying, Dad." I nodded again, and this time I did smile just a little. "I know," I said, and I meant it. That night, I sat alone in my study and thought about everything that had happened. The dinner, the fallout, the silence, and now this slow thawing. We weren't healed. We might never be. Some wounds leave scars too deep to fade completely. But I no longer carried the same anger. I no longer felt the urge to teach her a lesson. Life had done that already. And maybe that was what I'd wanted all along, not to punish her, but to let life show her what I couldn't. She had finally faced consequences, and instead of crumbling, she had taken the first step towards something real. Still, I kept my boundaries. I didn't offer her money. I didn't invite her back into the business. Not because I didn't believe in her, but because she needed to believe in herself without my endorsement. She needed to know that her worth wasn't tied to my approval or my bank account. I had spent too many years trying to protect her from struggle, not realizing that struggle is where character is forged. And now that she was finally walking through the fire, I wasn't going to pull her out. I was just going to wait on the other side, in case she made it through. And I think she will. Sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is step back and let their child face the world without a safety net. Do you think this father made the right call? Or should he have stepped in sooner? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you or made you think, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful real-life family dramas where love, pride, and betrayal collide in ways that leave lasting scars. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. See you soon in the next story.